loves, and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel. If you are new, hi, hello, my name is Loey. If I look a little bit familiar, I just filmed my story time about my, spirituality and all of that, and it took about 3 hours. I edited that video. I kind of just like, whew, and now I'm ready to talk about some spookier things. So if you guys watched that video and you were like, craving something scary, then I hope that this is the video for you. I found an article that contains literally some of the creepiest stories from Reddit ever. I mean, probably in the history of Reddit. It's actually insane. I love Reddit for scary stories. I love Let's Not Meet. I love No Sleep. I love Reddit. I feel like everybody just kind of bears their soul on there, whether it's fictitious or real, and these stories are pretty freaking creepy. So without any further ado, I'm not going to drag on for very long. Let's get into the video. Number 1 is called The Time Grandma Came to Say Goodbye. My paternal grandmother died when I was 6. I lived in New York. She lived in Pennsylvania. I met her maybe twice. I was 6 years old, asleep in bed one night, and for whatever reason, I woke up and walked into my parents' bedroom. My father had an easy chair in one corner for reading. I sat in the chair. On the opposite wall was my father's closet. It opened and Grandma came out and stood about 6 feet away. "I just wanted to say goodbye," she said. I have chills, oh my God. Smiled, waved, and turned back and walked into the closet, closing the door behind her. I went back to my room. About 2 hours later, about 6 a.m., the phone rings. It was a call from Pennsylvania that my grandmother Catherine had died in her sleep. My mother came to wake me up to tell me, and I said, "I know." "What do you mean?" "She came to say goodbye last night. She made me repeat the story 3 times and then told me to never ever tell my father that story. And I never did." That's so sweet though that her grandmother came through to say goodbye. Like, what a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful last memory with her grandmother that she really didn't have a lot of memories with. That is such a sweet and validating story. Number 2, you didn't hear that little girl singing? This happened my senior year of college, Christmas break 2006. I worked for a professor that asked me to house/dog sit for him while he was out of town to see the bowl game that we were all in. He was gone for 3 days and he had a huge piece of land in the middle of nowhere. I invited my girlfriend at the time. He had horses and fishing and a gator to ride around on, etc., etc. So the first 2 nights went down with no incident, but the last night, his floofy little dog is having a fit. She keeps barking at the back door. At first we blow it off, but decide to lock the dog inside in case of a coyote or something. After a little while, we start to get a little creeped out. I keep saying it's probably an animal and we'll be fine. My girlfriend, not too bright. That is not a nice way to talk about your girlfriend. She is probably a lot smarter than you. Wants to go investigate to see what's outside, so I lock the door behind her. Just kidding. She goes outside and says she saw something small and gray, probably a coyote, and it ran off. So just an animal, no worries, but by this time we were pretty spooked. The dog now starts barking at the window on the other side of the house. We're still trying to ignore it, but a little worried. We decide to get into bed, awkward silence, and then I hear it. It sounds like a young girl singing a soft, eerie lullaby. I don't say anything, hoping my mind is playing tricks on me. My girlfriend says, "Let's get out of here." I say, "Why?" She says, "You didn't hear that little girl singing?" "Okay, let's get out." We got out. I even called someone to talk to me while we walked out to my car. Next morning, we went to clean up the house and such. Most scared I've ever been. Ever. Oh my God. That makes me wonder what was running around the outside of their home, or not their home, but the one that they were sitting. Ugh. Number 3 is get out. So this happened last summer, 2 summers ago now. We have an old Mercury Grand Marquis that my dad had wanted to buy for years. The owner would never sell it, even though it was just left sitting there. After he died, his daughter sold it to us for pretty cheap because she knew how bad my dad wanted it. So one day, I drove it to my friend's house on a rainy day to play some Smash Brothers. I left at 10 that night and it had stopped raining, and I had to drive my friend home. So this car's radio didn't work, and it would only be static if it was on. Well, I turned down my friend's road, and when I turned, I heard someone say, "Get out." I know it wasn't my friend because he was talking to me. So we continued this conversation and I got to his house about 5 minutes later. When we got there, I asked him if he had heard something weird when we turned onto the road. He said he heard the exact same thing that I did, and I was freaked out. This sounds like such a made-up story and I really wish it was, but safe to say I haven't driven that car since. Ugh, That guy, the former owner, definitely had some strange attachments to his car, to say the least. Number 4 is playing hide and seek with Allie. I still have fresh memories of this. When I was very young, about 3 or 4, I remember having a friend named Allie. Guys, this one is really creepy. Allie lived with me and I would play hide and seek with her in the backyard. Allie was a year older than me. Allie loved my mom, but wouldn't stay long enough to meet her. My mom didn't believe I had a friend named Allie. I kept telling her, and my mom first got a very white face and told me to stop. Allie isn't real. Well, one night, Allie told me she had to leave, so she did. Never heard from her again. Fast forward to when I was 16 and my mom finally told me that before I was born, I had a sister named Allie and she had passed away due to complications. I don't remember what the problem was, something about her lungs, I think. My mom tells me it was all probably a coincidence since a divorce was going on during that time and I so wanted a friend. But I still remember everything about Allie and I refuse to believe it was all pretend. I am covered in chills, you guys. That one, that scared the living crap out of me. That's such a good story though. 5 is I forgot to tell you about George. I worked the graveyard shift in a hospital kitchen about 5 years ago. Before the kitchen was renovated a few years prior, our dish room used to be part of the morgue. Oh, okay, casual. While I was training, I'd frequently feel like someone was watching me, especially when I crossed into that part of the hallway. Every time I went into the dish room, something would be moved, turned over, or missing. Assuming it was my coworker, I didn't think anything about it. About a week later, my coworker leaves and I'm left on my own. Every night, I would hear carts being moved around, dishes being put away, and silverware rattling. If I would leave for a minute, I'd get back and my radio would be switched to a different station. It got to the point where I was terrified to come to work every night. I called my old coworker, told her what was going on, and she very calmly said, "Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you about George." Apparently, George was a nurse/medical examiner who had a stroke and died while at work. He was in his 50s, I was told. From then on, everything was actually quite well. I introduced myself to George, asked him to please keep it down, and as long as I said hi to him before I started work, he didn't seem to bother me anymore. It took us a little while to find a radio station we could agree on, but we worked harmoniously after that. When I left the job a year later, I made sure I told the girl that replaced me. If I learned from my coworker that there was just casually, you know, an older man who passed away who, you know, just happened to still work in the building, I would be pretty freaking mad. 6, let's sing happy birthday to the ghost. We moved into a new house a few months ago. As we were in the process of purchasing the house, the renter who was living in it died unexpectedly of natural causes in his mid-40s. He died right in the middle of the living room. Shortly after we move into the house, almost immediately our 2-year-old daughter starts talking about the ghost that lives in our house. Now let's be real here, she is 2 and 2-year-olds are very impressionable. Halloween had recently passed and she had this Halloween themed picture book that she loved to read, so it's entirely possible that all of this talk of ghosts was just coming from looking through that book on a regular basis. Still, she was always telling me that the ghost was in her playhouse in the basement, or the ghost was on the stairs, or the ghost was standing in the corner. She never seemed to be afraid of the ghost and considered him to be her friend, so I wasn't all that concerned even if there really was a ghost haunting our house. If he's a nice and helpful ghost, it could certainly be a lot worse. I would often tell the ghost that he was welcome to stay if he wanted to, but he was also welcome to go if that would make him happier. I was about 30-70 on the ghost being real and she could see and talk to him, versus the ghost just being her imagination fueled by her Halloween book. Until one day, when we were all going to the car to go to daycare in the morning. It was still dark out and rainy. My daughter told me that the ghost was on the back deck, and then she told me that today was the ghost's birthday, and she wanted to sing him happy birthday. Once again, I mostly disregarded what she was saying as she is birthday obsessed and has in the past made us sing happy birthday to Mickey Mouse, a bowl of fruit snacks, and the bathroom. So we sang and wished the ghost a happy birthday and went on with our lives. Later that day, out of pure curiosity, I looked up the obituary of the man who had died in our house. And wouldn't you know it, it was his birthday. That one gives me chills too. I think that kids can see things that oftentimes adults can't because we start to put up guards, or as Haley always says, our spiritual egos. So I'm sure that she really was friends with a ghost that lived in their house. This is called The Man That Comes On and Talks to Us at Night until we fall asleep. I have 4 little cousins who never got to meet my grandfather. He passed away before they were born. One morning, they ran downstairs for breakfast as they usually do. As my uncle was getting their food ready, one pointed to the fridge and said, "That's him." My uncle, not thinking much of it, said, "Who?" and looked over. They were pointing at a picture of my grandfather that they never got to meet. My cousin responded, "That's the man who comes and talks to us at night until we fall asleep sometimes." That's such a sweet story. I have a lot of stories of my dad's mother, so my paternal grandmother coming and being with us a lot, and I never got to meet her. So it's so cool how family stays with us after they pass. Number 8 is please tell the little girl to get out of my room. And that is a very, very spooky title. I worked the night shift as an RN in a very big old nursing home. It's important to note that this home and the religious organization that ran it are currently part of the Royal Inquiry into the institutional response to the abuse of children. The nurses that had worked there for 30+ years used to delight in telling younger staff that when it was used as a children's home, they used to bury the children that died in the rose garden. This old rose garden was apparently under a newer wing of the home. At least 4 times in my 2 years of working there, we would have elderly, close to death patients wake, totally lucid in the dead of night, and ask us, "Please tell that little girl to get out of my room," or "Please tell that little boy to get out of the corner, he's looking at me." Being in this huge, dark, old, creepy building that had a very awful history, and then that happening? Nope. I would never do my rounds alone, and when it happened, it was terrifying. It made my blood run cold, and I'd get a friend to work with me the rest of the night. I was not the only person that this happened to either. It was a regular occurrence. I think that's what I'm gonna title this video. Please tell the little girl to get out of my room, because that is so freaking creepy. Oh my God, that people who were on their deathbeds, basically, sadly, but basically, were like, "Please tell that little kid to get out of my room." You know what they were seeing. Number 9 is, this demon lady literally got inches from my face. Some of these titles are very foreboding, I'm telling you. Know how when you die, you see the white light and some report the lady or whatever that guides you through? I've never heard the lady. I mean, I've heard like angels and stuff like that. So I'm lying in bed, wake up, heart racing, died in a dream, so I woke up. Except I can't move. My body's frozen. I see at the foot of my bed this almost demon-like lady in a white dress walking towards me. I thought, well, I'm dead. I must have had a heart attack in my sleep. The demon lady got literally inches from my face. Then I could move and it was over. If it was a demon, I mean, what he's describing, it doesn't seem bad when he says it was in a white dress, like it sounds like an angel or something, but if he was freaked out by it, like that doesn't sound very good at all. Maybe it was really just sleep paralysis and he was mistaking like something that wanted to get into his body for a demon, or maybe it really was a demon lady, who knows. 10. Who was turning the doorknob? When my family had hit hard times, we had to move into a small house where our uncle had recently shot and killed himself. He had done this because of his depression after his wife had overdosed on pills and died the summer before. It all happened so quickly that when we moved there was still a little bit of blood in one of the rooms. But on the 3rd or 4th night of living there, my sister and I, who were sharing a room in the tiny house, were awake in our room playing video games at around 1 to 2 in the morning when someone knocks on our door. We didn't think anything of it and shouted for whoever was outside the door to come on in. No answer. No knock. Another knock. We stop and stare at the door, and another knock comes. The doorknob does a full rotation and snaps back as if someone turned it and let it go very quickly. I get up and open the door, expecting to see one of my other sisters or my mother, the only other people in the house. I opened the door and stared into the empty hallway. I walk down the hall and peek into the other bedroom where my 2 younger sisters and my mother are both fast asleep. Probably their uncle telling them that it's way too late at night to be playing video games and they need to get their butts in bed. Number 11, the disembodied head of a woman floating above my bed at night. Casual. Lived in this dark, creepy-ish rental house from 4th to 7th grade. I don't know if the house was actually haunted or not, but my mom, my sister, and me always got these creepy feelings around various areas of the house, particularly the closet and bathroom in the master bedroom. Anyways, my sister, who was a little bit younger than me, would tell me how she saw the disembodied head of a woman floating above my bed at night, watching me sleep. I admit, at night I would get this eerie feeling that something I couldn't see was watching me, but trying to be the tough 9-year-old, I brushed off what she was saying as the ramblings of a 7-year-old. Nothing really happened for months, and I even forgot what my sister said, until one night I was in a particularly deep sleep when I suddenly heard the blood-curdling scream of a woman right inside my ear. At first, I thought it was my mom or my sister messing with me, but when I glanced across the room, I saw my sister sleeping in bed. I went to my mom's room to find her sleeping as well. And there's no other woman in the house that could have possibly done it. That, again, sounds like something that was like watching her sleep and hoping there was some kind of access into her body or something. Number 12 is kind of a longer one from what I'm seeing, and it's called I'll Never Forget That Sound of the Lock Turning by Itself. This is a brief account of an experience I had almost a year ago in the warehouse where I work alone. No one I've told has ever believed me, but perhaps you all will. I work in a warehouse that my father purchased. He bought it for about 25% of its cost from a farmer who seemed very excited to be rid of it. Red flag number 1. In the middle of Mennonite country with no neighbors for half a mile around. Look out the window, you'll see cornfields and scraggly trees. Cell service? Forget about it. I work here alone, painting and preparing the front office portion for eventual functionality. Functuality. That is a weird word. To get to the front office, you must go through a hallway from the main warehouse into a secondary office, then through another door in the front. I frequently hear bumps and thuds, and occasionally will go into the warehouse and feel air movement, but I've always attributed it to drafts and animal life in the roof. The only thing that has ever made me feel uneasy about the building is the fact that all of the door locks are reversed. Whoever installed those locks didn't intend to keep people out. They intended to keep something in. I was in the front office when I began to hear the thudding. I ignored it and continued to apply the masking tape to the door I was working on. But this time it was accompanied by a screeching sound. Not loud, but audible. I was freaked out, but convinced myself it was just a pissed off raccoon or a squirrel that had found its way inside. I continued working until I heard the slam. The door to the secondary office had been open. It sounded like it had just violently slammed shut. I peeked around the corner and saw that I was right. The secondary door was now closed. I tried to logic it through my head that a strong draft had sucked it closed, although I knew there was no such draft. The thudding began again. Close this time. I've never been able to put a proximity on it, but now it sounded like it was right on the other side of the door. I froze, unsure of what was happening. My eyes locked on the door handle, which began to turn. The door disengaged its latch and slowly swung open. Wider, wider. Nothing there. Nothing visible. No air movement, just quiet. So quiet. A quiet that seemed to overwhelm me with its presence. A quiet so thick I couldn't breathe. The quiet was shattered when the screech came again. And this time it was clearly human. Pained, anger emanating from the main warehouse. The door slammed. That entirely broke my frozen, fearful state, and I ran. I got into my car and I drove until I was in cell range to call my father. He didn't believe anything about the doors closing, but agreed that the building had something weird about it. He told me he'd be right out. Fast forward half an hour. My dad and I met up and drove back to the warehouse. I showed him the door that slammed, showing him that it separated from both the front office and the main warehouse, so no draft could have closed it. I told him about the thuds, the screeching, and the sudden quiet that overcame the building. He decided that we should check the main warehouse. Emboldened by his presence, I led the way. Something you should know about this warehouse: it was formerly a furniture manufacturing place owned by a Mennonite farmer. They made handmade chairs, tables, etc. Because of all the cutting that went on, the floor is thickly coated with dust. We walked into the warehouse and saw nothing out of the ordinary. The dust was untouched, the doors were closed, windows were locked. The only thing out of the ordinary was one of the hanging fluorescent light fixtures. It was hanging askew and swaying slightly. Insisting we take a look at the mount to ensure it didn't just break loose, my dad grabbed a stepladder. He supported it while I climbed up and grabbed the swinging light. I looked on the top of the light and saw a handprint. A single, fresh, and humanly large handprint. No footprints in the dust around the light, no signs of a presence. I climbed down and switched places with my father. He saw it and said, "What? No one's been in here for years." He climbed down and told me he'd been suspicious of someone breaking in and stealing parts from the warehouse light system. He couldn't believe that this wasn't human and that something wasn't right there. The last thing he said was, "Nothing is here. Next time, just go back to work." And then, as if to show its presence, the thud returned. But this time, it wasn't just a thud, but more of an earthquake. The entire building felt like it moved. The heartbeat-like thud was then overlaid by the screech, that awful, awful screech. It felt like it was coming from the walls themselves, and we ran. We ran and I haven't returned. My father hired someone to finish my job and has since moved into the office. He's heard the thudding, but thus far nothing has happened further. What actually happened? I don't know, nor do I ever care to know. What I do know is that there is something paranormal in that building, and the man who sold it to us knew. I'll never forget the sound of that lock turning by itself, or the feeling of the deafening silence. Oh man, that one was intense, but it doesn't surprise me that when the dad was saying this isn't real, chill out, like whatever, that the thudding returned and it felt like an earthquake in the building. Because when there are dark entities, they really feed off of you believing in them and off of you being frightened. I think the only thing I'm super curious about is what would have been locked in those rooms. Why were there locks on the outside like that? I don't get it. And I think that part might creep me out the most. Number 13 is the ghost in Grandma's house. My grandma lives in a very beautiful old house in New Jersey. It's pre-Civil War and was built around 1820, if my memory serves correctly. For years, my grandpa would tell stories to me and my cousins about the ghost that lives there. And my dad would always get very mad at him because he didn't want us to be scared. Now, my dad is a former Marine of 12 years. There's not much that scares him. That's like my dad too. Not in the Marine for 12 years, but nothing ever scared him. He's been to some pretty bad places and done some dangerous things, but he refuses to be in the house alone. If everyone goes out to get pizza, he won't stay at the house, even if we'll only be gone for 20 minutes. I've never seen a ghost myself, but of course this gives me the creeps. However, there's a few people in my family who have. One night, my grandpa, who had very bad vision, was walking up the stairs. He said he was startled by something and realized he was actually inside the ghost, as he had walked straight through her. The ghost seemed startled too and ran away. That sounds like someone who doesn't know that they've passed or that they've moved on. When my cousins were born, my aunt took them over to my grandma's house. My grandma was holding one of them, just a little baby, when the ghost appeared. She said it was a woman and it was also holding a baby. She was very convinced that the ghost was trying to tell her, look, I also have a baby, like you. After my grandpa died, my dad slept in the house with just my grandma there for a few nights. He said he was absolutely positive something weird was gonna happen, and he barely slept. I don't really know if he saw anything, but I would have been spooked out of my mind. My aunt forgot her keys or something one time and had to run back to the house alone. She saw a face peering out the window, even though no one was home, and it was that of a woman just like what my grandma had seen. And that is the final story. This video got a little bit longer than I intended for it to, but those are some of the short creepy stories on Reddit. I love doing story readings like this where it's a bunch of shorter stories. Sometimes it's nice when we're taking a break from some of the viral scary stories. I hope you all enjoyed this one, and if you did, don't forget to give me a thumbs up and please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I love you guys and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.